Hello, this is Franco Cabral broadcasting from the Honest Liar podcast, a conversation around finding the inner liar within all of us and leveraging the truth to create expansion across all areas of your life. Today's topic is I am not alone, and I'm actually not alone because I am with my business partner, Marco Vitolo, friend, brother, workout partner for the last 10, 12 years, and extremely excited to bring you a raw, authentic conversation about some of the challenges building a business together, some of the reasons why we've succeeded as successful business partners together, and just kind of jump right into it. It's an interesting experience to be here with you because we talk all day long, obviously not under this sort of setting, so we're gonna have some fun and just do what we do every day.
Of course.
So Marco and I partnered together starting in April of 2016. Before that, though, I want you to share kind of a little bit about who you are as a person and professionally up until that point when we decided to jump into this.
So as you know, we met at the gym, and we are the type of people that likes to constantly compete with one another. And we were in a sports conditioning class, and I saw this tanned olive skinned Dominican passing me when we were doing some sort of cardiovascular drill. And right at that moment, I was like, I need to start mirroring this guy because he was always pushing me to the highest level. And then from there, we just kind of started our relationship organically, hanging out and just constantly working out with obviously you and your wife and your mom. And we created this little gym routine that we did consistently for almost like 8 years. From a professional side, as you know, I have an inside sales background where I sold aviation and electronic components to the U.S. government, DLA, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon. And right out of college, as you guys all know, you're trying to find yourself. What do you really want to be? And it's kind of ironic because I was a media major and I wanted to become a reporter. And 12 years later, behind a bunch of cameras right now. But obviously that didn't work out, and I had an opportunity to go into a sales company that was 2-3 years removed. And I had a lot of success moving forward. I learned a lot. One of my biggest mentors promised me the world. And you hear this often where the story ending ends bad, but he kind of delivered on everything. So at a very early point of my professional career, I believed in partnerships and relationships. As long as you trust, and trust is built over time. As my career progressed during that company, which was Crestwood Technology Group, I was financially free. I was living a very comfortable life. My girlfriend at the time, who is my wife now, saw the growth, and we had a lifestyle that we can kind of do what we want. And then as I continued to grow our family and I started to have kids, it shifted. From a professional to more of, what's really important. And as the company grew at my other place, the culture environment kind of changed. And that my wife saw me change, and it was about the money. And once you start to have kids and you understand life a little bit more, you start to value things differently. And at that point, from what you shared with me, we had similar parallel professional careers. Where we were making, a good chunk of change, but we weren't fulfilled and we weren't happy. And at a certain point, something switched. We were valuing money over happiness. And once you start to, try to guide your kids and be that security blanket for your wife, your values change. And at that point, we kind of put our heads together and try to figure out what we want to do. And, 3 years later, we're here right now.
Awesome. So you mentioned financial freedom, and that it's an interesting topic because I think that most people listening, I know myself, before I got to that place, that was kind of that was it. Like that's what we were supposed to be doing in business, professionally, achieving financial freedom. So here you found yourself in a place of financial freedom, but there was something missing. You mentioned your kids. Was it that? Like what else? What drives you from leaving financial freedom, which is what we've been chasing most of our lives, to decide I'm going to leave financial freedom to take this jump?
Well, I mean, we're born salespeople and we want instant gratification constantly. So the shoes and the clothes can only bring you happiness for such a short period of time. And I was trying to create a lifestyle where I was happy much more than just buying a pair of shoes and letting that last for 24 to 48 hours, or a suit that I was ready to wear at a wedding or whatever that may be. And it was really about, it was more soul searching and trying to figure out what I really want in life, and what's the most important thing. And that was really happiness, because I found out that if I'm not fulfilled and I'm not happy, how can I make my wife happy? How can I show up and show my kids what happiness is about? How can it be, um, to my parents, showing happiness to them? And that's kind of where it kind of switched. It wasn't like it wasn't one particular moment. It happened, and it just kind of like switched. And I was like, what have I been doing in my life? And I wasn't being fulfilled by superficial things.
So I can very much relate to that moment that you had, and I describe it in my first episode, the Origins podcast. For me, I stayed though in that place for almost 2 years. There was a lot of fear associated with leaving the things that at that point for me defined, or so I thought defined who I was. Was there any one moment, you mentioned this switch, thinking about it, that kind of was like, all right, that's it, I've had enough. Obviously I know that it coincidentally, and I'm grateful that it happened very similarly around the time where I had my breaking point, which, as was Sienna and a conversation that I had. I don't know if it was that kind of lightning bolt moment for you, or if it was a series of events. What do you think got you to that place where I've had enough, I have to make a change?
Well, I don't think it was one moment like you experienced. I remember, I was at CTG for about 12 years. And I think about year 6 or 7, I started to interview. I started interviewing for some pharmaceutical jobs, and I had offerings, but I was afraid. I was afraid to lose the money and the lifestyle I had. And I continued to suck it up. And then um, I guess you can call a band-aid was getting my real estate license. I think that was the first step of moving out of, what I was currently living. And with real estate, it was, taking on 2 jobs, and one of them was part-time. It was nothing but being part-time, but I found a lot of happiness in meeting new people, and the joy I provided when they bought a new home. That's a big, decision that any person makes. And I think that was kind of the catalyst that started to really move me in the direction of what you've done for the past 6 to 8 years is something that you can't do the rest of your life.
It's interesting how at least I know when I was in a place of fear, I felt very stuck. And for you, you had something else that kind of opened up a new door and then kind of pulled you, versus in fear we kind of stay stuck. That opened up a new possibility for you. Obviously, we found ourselves in a very similar place. Why a partnership? Why entrepreneurship? So I guess kind of 2 questions there. Answer in whichever order you want. Was it partnership first, then the idea of entrepreneurship, then, hey, I want to partner? How did that thought process come up for you?
That's a fair question. It's a deep question. I don't think they correlated with one another. I knew that I was unhappy, and the culture environment was something I could not get over. And I would just, and I, it wasn't just me at this place. There was other people of doing it, but they were content. And, and it was more about, if I'm going to make this jump, I kind of want to do it somewhat on my terms and control my own destiny. There's so many things out there in life that, are dictated by other people. And I wanted to do it my way. And I'm not saying that my way is the best way, but it starts within. And then it wasn't even about, I wouldn't really say that I'm leaving to create a partnership. It kind of just happened. And I've heard a lot of horror stories about partnerships, and a lot of people close to me were like, partnerships, from my understanding, you usually don't work. There's always one partner that is dominant, or They don't get along, and you hear these stories of people getting robbed. And you know what? I felt like we dated for like 12 years before this kind of happened. And I know your family, and I know your mom, and your siblings, and I just knew I trusted my heart. I followed my heart. And what's the worst thing that can possibly happen? The worst thing that can possibly happen is this doesn't work out. We continue being friends and we continue moving on. And it was an experience that I was willing to take, and I had the support from my wife. And that was kind of really, my openness. And I think it happened really organically. It's not like I sat down with my wife and said, listen, I want to start something, but I have to be the person. It was like, I think we have an opportunity. I've been unhappy. Here's an opportunity that we can do, and if you can support me, I'm gonna run with it.
That's awesome. And I do agree. It was very organic. I really feel like I hit the lottery, because I can't say that this was planned. I can't say that I did I can teach somebody, how to pick the right partner. I got lucky. That's at least how I feel. I can tell you things now, looking backwards, that I definitely probably should have thought about, and considered. But they say ignorance is bliss, and I was ignorant. I definitely went with my gut, from knowing you, and what I did understand, at least for me, was that the values you mentioned, were very, very important to me. I started to think about life differently. We both had young kids. I had just one at the time. Now it's two. You had two. Now it's four. So it's been an interesting few years. But we wanted this. We wanted similar things. We were headed in the same direction in our lives, and for me, that was extremely valuable and important. And I don't think either one of us really thought too much of what it takes to have a successful partnership, or who would be a successful partner. At least in the beginning, at least I feel lucky. You can share if you thought about it deeper than I did. I kind of just took a jump. Did you?
I mean, naive is very conservative statement. I think we would just kind of went in this completely blind, and I think that's almost the best thing, to a certain extent. But I knew you for 12 years. It wasn't like we sat down and we're like, well, what are you really good at, and what do you need to grow in, and I'm good here, and it wasn't even that. Lucky for us, that some of my biggest weaknesses are your biggest strengths. I also think that if we had the same personality and the same strengths and the same weaknesses, I'm not sure the way it would have ended.
That's 100% correct. We are just about as opposite as it gets, with just enough similarity in the middle that makes sense. So there's a certain aspect to taking a jump, and not overthinking things. And obviously we crushed that. We had no problem taking a huge jump. Now looking backwards and knowing what you know now, if you were listening to this podcast as an entrepreneur that was thinking on taking on a partner, or starting up a new business and considering the idea of partnership, obviously you said it was a gift that we didn't know. But if you were thinking about, what would you be looking in a solid partnership? What are some of the things that you'd be considering, or you'd want to tell one of the listeners to consider?
Well, if you're thinking about doing it, do it. Just do it. You'll regret it, and regret's like one of the worst things you can, deal with. I think for you is different. I've known you for 12 years. We've shared our stories. I've seen your growth. I've seen your lifestyle. I had somewhat of a resume of who you are. If it's somebody else and it's a referral, then just do your homework. And don't judge them on what you see on social media or the things they say, and that's difficult. You have to give a leap of faith. And, obviously I was transitioning from one industry to another. So at that point, I knew that for this to really work, I needed to let go of my ego, and trust you for the first couple of months to really see how the business was. So when we first started this, I had to take it from an aerial view and say, well, this works here, this doesn't work. And then obviously with my experience, to sit down and share some things that, I think that we can do better.
So that's a lot of faith.
Yes, it was.
And obviously you had a unique advantage. We had a unique advantage in that we kind of were unknowingly courting each other for a long time. So, what I'm hearing from that is, not just looking necessarily at a business resume and getting, what somebody has done, because a lot of our success, I feel, is in all the extra courtship, and consider maybe spending some time getting to really know somebody on a personal level, what they represent, what their values are like, and actually spending time, before you were to like, that would be a recommendation I would have is like get to know somebody. Like you want to know that you actually enjoy spending time with that person because we spend a lot of time together. We have fun, and that's an important part for me of why this works. So definitely do your homework, on the person if you're not as lucky as we were to have been partnered for a long time. So one of the things that I talk about often is, how entrepreneurship is scary, and it for me it exposed a lot of weaknesses as to the person that I was, and I was a very talented salesperson. Obviously, you have similar background. We built sales organizations. What did entrepreneurship expose for you? What weaknesses do you think, or do you think entrepreneurship exposed any weaknesses?
Listen, we're in the people business, and I was only really speaking to salespeople. I'm helping and coach salespeople. It's much different when you're managing accounting, telemarketing, design. So they think much differently than you. So I had to open up and be, I had to kind of just take everyone from a grain of salt and give everyone an opportunity, and not judge. I think that was the biggest thing, is not judging, because everyone looks at things differently and everyone goes about things differently. And if I'm trying to create culture environment, I have to be open to it and trust people, because I want certain things to be a certain way, but not everyone will fall in line.
So, you mentioned getting to know people and, kind of, learning different personalities. And one of the things that you previously said was, you had to let go of your ego. How'd you do that? Like, how do you go about that? Because ego is a big part of sales, and just what could you speak about as it relates to the topic of ego, whether in partnerships or just as an entrepreneur in business altogether?
You're not bigger than the company. That's really what it comes down to. You have two successful salespeople coming together and trying to build something, and not one person can do it on their own. And it takes an army of people. So if you are going to run your business from a place of ego, you are going to create an environment where people are always having some sort of egotistic manner about they go about their day. So, it's really about leaving it at the door, and it's about everybody, and it's not about one person.
So, ego and leaving it at the door, that's not an easy thing to do. And I know that you've done an amazing job with that, especially you were the front guy in your previous organization, and when we started, you kind of had to let me lead until you got your bearings, and now we co-lead, and I'm grateful for all the things you do. I'm grateful for the things that I get to do as well. But that took you putting your side of ego at the top. What do you, when it comes to leading by example, because now we've created a culture, I believe, where ego is not part of our culture, and that starts at the top. What other things that you do, do you feel that have kind of trickled into the business from a leadership standpoint? What's our culture like? What in Mark Media, I pride myself and us on developing a great culture, and one of the things is not having ego. So what else could you say to the culture that we've created, and then maybe how we went about doing that?
I think freedom comes to mind when you say that, and we want everyone to have their own voice and their own say. If someone thinks that they have a better way of doing it, we've always had this culture and environment that has stemmed from go out and try it. If it works, we'll go implement it. And then that gives people the opportunity to really start to find themselves and them to go outside of the box. And if they're going outside of the box, they're growing. And in entail, if they're growing, they're going to be producing more. And it's a trickle down from the top, from the bottom.
So we're going to go a little deeper now.
Okay.
Okay. So you have 4 children.
Yes.
You're married. As a father, great father, businessman. You have a pretty hectic life.
I do.
So what have been some of the biggest challenges that building this business has brought to your personal life? What sort of struggles have you had to try and overcome?
Leaving everything at the door. I was, and it's taken time and years. You have a rough day or you have rough moments throughout the day. You got to leave it at the door, because at the end of the day, it's not fair to your wife. It's not fair to your boys when you come in with a bad attitude when they haven't seen you for 10, 11, 12 hours. And that's all they want to do is hug and play you. It's not fair to take out any frustration on them. And I did. There's no doubt about it. I still do to this day. I'm working on that, right, Kara? But it's really just disconnecting, and that's hard. And the biggest thing is just living in the moment and being present. You're a father. These kids grow fast, and I don't want to have any regret saying I wasted 2 years because I was struggling with work, or we were going through some difficult times or moments. And I allowed my emotions to come home and take that out on them. It's just not fair.
So how do you do that? This is I think it's a very relevant topic for any entrepreneur who has a family as well. Leaving it at the door, that's not as easy as it sounds. And I have seen you, drastically improve myself as well. How have you? And what are you currently doing to try and improve on that? And what would you recommend, for people that are trying to figure that out?
There's from a tactical approach, meditation has definitely helped. It's given me, 5-10 minutes to kind of just clear my head and then kind of walk into the house. Let's be clear. I still have, those moments at home, and it just happens naturally. And my wife does too. It just happens. I think reps and just being self-aware, throughout the day, things are going to always evolve and come up, and you handle them much differently because you've experienced them before. And, they don't hold too much weight and time anymore as much. And you just kind of, every problem has a solution, and you just figure that out. And then when you get home, you have to understand that if you only have 2 hours with your kids, anything that is an issue can wait for 2 hours. If you really want to think about it, it's 120 minutes. It's not really that big of a deal. And it's something that, I continue to work on day to day.
Meditation. Is that something new for you? Is that something you've been doing for a long time? How long have you been meditating?
Oh, I thought it was a complete joke. I thought it was a joke. Franco sits down. He wants me to sit down in a weird stance and have this, hippie type of woman talk to me in my ear. And, I'm always open to trying new things. And at first, it was difficult. I was like, this is causing me more stress now. But it's as you continue to try and do it consistently, it's been something that I could leverage throughout the day when I'm having a difficult time. Or in the morning, it sets the tone for me to start the day. So it's been an experience, and I leverage it throughout the day to kind of give me some peace of mind.
So meditation, that definitely is become a powerful tool for me as well. Clearing space and just kind of setting my intentions for the day. And for me, similar to what you just described, I use it as a transition. And sometimes it's a transition from a workout to the day. If I'm going from one meeting to the next, just breathing. From home, I used to struggle immensely from turning it off at home. For me, it was actually something that really resonated with me and made me make that switch at home. Was I actually realized that nobody saw me when I came home. because I was on the phone. I just wasn't energetically present. And now, fast forward a long time from now, a lot of work, a lot of reps, I come home and I'm Superman. And I see the way that your kids look at you, and it's the same way. There's no better feeling in the world. Having said that, though, meditation is great to create space, but sometimes it's just not enough. And sometimes there's emotions and feelings that linger on beyond a meditation. And we talk about this often within our company. I think it's a core foundation of our relationship, this idea of collisions and colliding when something is on your mind. Ironically, part of why we're here today is because we had a collision last week. And I was really grateful for that collision. But tell me a little bit about the topic, exactly what it was, and how, what happened for you and kind of the space you were in and the conversation that led up to today.
So, when it comes to any type of partnership or relationship in general, really, it doesn't have to be a business partnership. It's all about communication, and things are going to happen and transpire, and some of it is planned, and some of it just people are unaware of it. And I think the biggest thing is about if you're feeling a certain way towards somebody, good or bad, just be honest and be real, and make sure that you deliver it in a respectful manner. And if you have a close relationship with that person, they're always going to understand. If they get defensive or disrespectful, then that's not the partnership or relationship you want. The thing that we've created is we've given ourselves the opportunity to always speak to one another, and regardless, good or bad. But it always, from our perspective, it's always given us an opportunity to create something even bigger. So anyone that is in a relationship or a partnership, and you feel a certain feeling, it's not about unhappiness or a certain strategy that we were doing. It was just something that I felt uneasy about. And if you don't share that feeling, what happens? You don't say anything, and then maybe a month later something else happens, and then another month later and something else happens. And then you get upset about something that has nothing to do with the root cause of why you were feeling a certain way. So for us, we've always had the relationship and the frame to just be open and be truthful for one another and to hear each other out. And it's given us the opportunity to strengthen our relationship and then and grow professionally and personally.
That is, I believe, a big reason why we have a very successful partnership is having the courage to collide. And this idea of collision is, most people see it as a negative thing. Collision could be a negative thing if the collision is to destroy, is based on ego, I need to be right, or there's a collision out of love and a collision that builds. So Friday, you came to me and you said, "Hey, we need to talk." And I was like, "What? What's going on?" That's nobody ever. As soon as you hear we need to talk, you go to the worst place possible. And I said, "Of course. What do you need? How can I help?" And I was immediately at attention. So you shared to me how you were feeling. Would you mind sharing with our listeners a little bit about what was going on for you and what that conversation was?
Sure. So obviously, we've been at this in Mark and building an empire for the past 3 years or so. And as I've seen you leverage certain resources, you have made a leap where you are creating, a following with your Honest Liar podcast, which you guys should subscribe to iTunes if you haven't. There's your plug.
Thank you for the plug.
And it was, I just needed clarity on the direction of where you were going, and we didn't really speak about it. And when you don't have clarity on the direction of what you were trying to do with it, you create stories. And then, in the back of my head, I created a story as well. If I speak to him about this, how is he going to react? Is he going to be reactive? Because I know that you find some sort of power with doing this, and you've grown significantly in the past year. And this is something that you enjoy doing, and you've, stepped out of your comfort zone, and in the back of my head is like, who am I to tell this person, that is starting to move outside his comfort zone, growing as an individual, to stop. And it wasn't even saying stop. It was like, well, what's the plan? Talk to me about it. And I don't think we ever had that conversation. And then I created a story and I said, you know what, in the past, you know, this is such a very easy conversation and I've created a story behind it. We're just going to talk about it. I'm going to hear him out. He's going to hear me out. And then we're going to figure out, what we can do. And a week later, I'm sitting in the chair here.
So first thing was, and I think I've mentioned that, but thank you. Thank you for trusting me to have the courage to have that conversation, because you knew that this is a passion, and whenever there's passion involved, it's sensitive, and people have emotions tied to it. So if we didn't have the relationship we had, it easily could have gone a different direction and been a collision to burn, versus a collision to build. But out of it, some powerful things had come about, and your feelings were valid. And I think that's an important part of the process of understanding, that sometimes we get resentful because of not wondering if our feelings are valid or being heard. And at the end of the day, you were right in the lack of clarity that you had, because I'm still figuring it out. And I think what I was able to get across the opportunity was to explain my intentions. Whether I'm accomplishing my intentions or not, I'm still trying to figure that out. And we've created some powerful moves since then because of that conversation. But it wasn't an easy conversation to have. You mentioned stories, and I love we talk about it within our business a lot. One of the things that we both have recognized within our business, and we talk to our teams about, is when there's a lack of information, there's a gap that's created. And we have to fill that gap, as it's like a human nature. We need to know what's in that hole.
And we need to know now.
And we need to know right now. And if we don't have actual facts, we start to fill that with stories. And that process started, and you start to recognize, hey, I'm not feeling this feeling. This isn't a good feeling. So instead of filling it with stories, let's fill it with facts. And we had that opportunity because you said, hey, this is what I'm feeling. Is this real? Is this true? Or what else do I not know? Can I get all the information? And I think that's a huge lesson, not just for partnerships, in business, but I used to do that shit all the time with my wife. She didn't clean the dishes because she doesn't really care that my kitchen is clean, and she knows it's important to me. So she chose not to clean the dishes because she wanted to make sure I knew I'm not important to her. Like crazy things like that.
I think I kind of do that in my house though sometimes.
Are you? Which one are you? Are you me or you her?
I'm her.
Okay. All right. Cool. So I can very much relate to
Yes.
Kara. But it's just, it happens so often, and a collision to build produces essentially what happened out of this conversation. Basically, out of this conversation, you gave me a gift. You gave me the gift of, hey, I'm not really clear, and there's an opportunity that I'm missing. If I could get clear, then more can come of it. And I had the idea of building an audience. I have light that I want to share the truth side of, we're talking about partnerships, and we're going to get into some of the challenges that we've had, this being a minor challenge, if you will. But it produced a gift, and now we're working on co-branding. We're integrating other ideas that I never would have thought about. So I guess the message for the audience is that if you are thinking something's bothering you, you're always better off by having a collision out of love, a collision to communicate with somebody that you're going to, your intention is not to destroy or be right or have an ego. It's to find a way to fill that gap so that your stories aren't what's filling it, but the actual facts and intentions behind what's going on. So I think that's an excellent message. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, when it comes to collisions, it's like we do this all the time as parents. Like we collide with our kids because we want the best for them, So from a simplicity standpoint, it's really about just being open and communicating, and that leverages the relationship so that you don't put yourself in a position where you feel a certain way.
So what challenges? So obviously we've gotten to a place that now, we have these collisions within 2, 3 days. You were feeling a certain way, and we talked about it. What challenges, do you feel that we've had to deal with? What are some of the biggest challenges in either our partnership or within our business, that we've experienced to date?
Listen, I think the challenges that we had to experience happened in the first 6 to 8 months. And that was the dance that we did of really just feeling each other out. How does this guy operate? How does he operate under pressure? How does he work with other people? Um, I think, and how does he handle when our back's against the wall? And I don't think we ever really had any major challenges. It was just really about figuring out, how we could coexist with one another for the greater good and grow the business. I can honestly say from the bottom of my heart, I can't tell you one time where I was like, we had a collision that, could have really damaged the relationship. We have little bumps in the road just like any other relationship out there. And we've done a really great job of just being open with one another and hearing each other out and then really executing on things that we discussed, to make sure that, we're back on the same page. So, maybe it's a vanilla answer. I really can't say that there's been one thing that's really, I hold on to. It's really about, feeling each other out and seeing how you tick. And I assume you've done the same for me. And trying to figure out how we can coexist every single day and lead, people to becoming better individuals, better salespeople, better designers, better telemarketers. Because that's why we're here. We're here to help people become better versions of themselves.
So you gave me something extra to talk about, which is better versions. We're gonna go slightly. We're gonna come back to better versions of themselves in a second. But the topic of today's podcast is I'm not alone, and I couldn't have. You came up with it. I couldn't have thought of a better topic because I feel that I feel the same way in that we're very fortunate and we've had minor bumps in the road, but I've always been able to count on you. And I think without planning it, a lot of how you've shown up in business is also a lot how you've shown up in your personal life. And for me, the best experience I had was in the gym. You were able to consistently work out with us and be part of our workout team for 8 years. So to me, that's a very important trait is commitment. If you're able to keep commitment somewhere, then it's easier to keep commitment somewhere else when shit gets hard because working out sucks. And, I get to always feel better after every workout, but getting there in the morning and showing up consistently, for me, that was a big part of what showed me the character of the person that you were. But we did get lucky. And, I have you consider, if you're listening to this, is really think and try and do a resume check, not just on what they've done, but who they are and how, they might show up under pressure or the dark times because, being alone, could have broken us if we weren't on the same page in the darkest moments. What can you talk to the listeners about, the whole idea of I'm not alone, and why that's such an important theme and, the topic of today's podcast?
So I think the biggest thing is, I'm not alone is when usually for the most part when things aren't that good. So when I was in a bad place, the only, I guess the word is hope, that the way I can get pulled out of this is that Franco got my back and he's going to figure it out because right now I'm not in the best place. And I've provided that for you as well. But it's counting on somebody else because being an entrepreneur is a very lonely place. People think that it's this fun thing that you make a ton of money and you have a bunch of people working underneath you and you're just kind of directing them and guiding them. It's nothing like that at all.
No,
No.
no.
So it's really about it's given me hope. Hope is the big word, and when you have hope, that gives you an opportunity to continue on with what you want to do. So I've always had in the back of my mind that you're my security blanket. When I can't, it's like when you parachute, and if mine's not going off, at least I have somebody else that's going to save me. And that's the mindset I've always had, and you've always had my back. So you're not alone. So I'm telling you, you're not alone. But it's one of those things that's given me the strength to continue. It's also given me the opportunity to gamble a little bit more on certain things where I might have played the game a little bit conservative, because I know that, if it doesn't work out, I still have you there.
I love the analogy of, the second parachute. Because sometimes neither parachute is open. We've both been, no parachute open, but we were on that dive together. And, neither one of us jumped off. We just continued diving and we figured it out along the way. And that's to me the most important part, is recognizing, and I didn't even think about it, if you find the right partner, that's a big part of why partnerships are even more powerful, because it is very lonely. And, for me, there was, as far as counting on you, I've counted on you a tremendous amount of times. And, even in my marriage, there was times where I didn't have the courage to tell my wife some of the things that were going on that I was communicating to you. So that was a crucial part for me of the success. And you had my back and held me up at times when I couldn't hold myself up. For an entrepreneur that is in the middle of, a dark time, or having a difficult time, that, has a partner, but maybe is not leveraging that partner, what would you say to that person?
Talk to them immediately. Share with them. Be vulnerable. If it's a real partner that you trust, they're not going to judge you. And I think people at times are afraid because they don't want to be judged, specifically in your weakest moments. Sometimes when our back's against the wall, we do things that, are not conventional or out of, your normal routine. And sometimes you screw up and you're embarrassed. And I think people are fearful because they think that they're going to be judged to a certain extent, and they hold it in and they don't say anything, or just try to sweep it underneath the rug. The reality is, in any relationship, you can only sweep so much underneath the rug before it starts to come out.
Very, very true. And I know everything under your rug, and you know everything under my rug. So that transparency is the word that I think about when you say share and just be vulnerable. Because when you're holding on to things and nobody else knows, that's ultimately what creates the alone feeling, and not feeling like you can share. Is usually a story that we have, for fear of judgment, for fear of really being alone, and what would it mean if that person might not be there for me, so you don't even give them a chance. In the very beginning, as we were developing that vulnerability, and for me taking this jump, I felt a tremendous amount of pressure, because I was kind of that that front person initially, and you were counting on me, but we both supported each other in those early stages. So a business that's in its infancy stages is starting out, and what would you share with them as it relates to, maybe they don't have that same support that we have? What would you recommend to them going through that difficult, startup phase for them to do?
Remember why you started, right? Believe in yourself, and continue to believe, because if you don't believe in yourself, nobody else is going to believe in yourself. Obviously, reach out to peers or mentors, and you'll find out that what you're experiencing is no different than what any other entrepreneur has experienced. It's easier to say this now, 3 years down the road. 6 months into it, I'm like, what the heck did I get myself into? But I always recalled, where I was 6-8 months before that, and that feeling of emptiness. I wasn't empty, I can tell you that. I had a ton of emotion. But it also was, this is you growing. You're uncomfortable, and to answer your question is really about continuing to believe in yourself every single day, and don't forget why you did what you did.
All right, so I am not alone. Obviously we've talked about it, and we're grateful that we have each other. However, having said that, even though we have each other, there are still moments that I remember very vividly where I was alone in, a tough, physically alone, and I wasn't in a space where I could share how I was feeling really in that moment, and I just kind of sat in a dark space. If you recall back over the last few years, is there one dark space that you can think of, that really kind of pops out at you, where you were alone, and in the feelings of whatever it was you were feeling or going through, what was that process like, and how did you work through that for yourself?
So one of the hardest moments that I think that I had to experience was one of the programs that we launched in California. Um, you know, I guess I was fortunate enough that one of the programs that we did started, has continued on and helped the company grow significantly. Um, what I'm talking about now is this cart corral program that we did in California. I kind of took, the lead on it, and it was by far a very costly program that we didn't really have at the time. We're talking close to $250,000. And I was the lead person on it, and I worked with the manufacturer, I worked with installation and maintenance, and it was a complete dud. And I remember 6 months into it, where the program was just launched, our salespeople were super excited, and I didn't take in consideration weather. I didn't take in consideration that it was outdoors. I didn't take in consideration that it was available to the public, where they can damage it or do graffiti. And we work on a day-to-day, month-to-month basis. And with any business, you just can't walk away from $250,000. And I remember getting home after a phone call where one of the clients were disappointed because the orange color of the cart corral turned peach. And at that point, I didn't want to admit it, but I knew that the program was going to go downhill. And then the fear was, can this be the reason why this company doesn't exist or falls apart? And I felt guilty to allow, the 25 employees we had, and then also that I put us in a position where, something that I thought I was taking the lead on was a complete bust. So it was a lot of guilt, a lot of shame. I mean, I thought it out, I gave it 100%, and it just didn't work out.
So I didn't know how much you took responsibility for that, even really up until this moment, because you did not make that decision alone. We both took a jump on it. We both thought it was a good idea, and all the signs pointed to it was a great idea until it wasn't. And how did you? Because that could have been an ending, $250,000 when we were a touch and go, week to week cash flow, kind of company. How'd you overcome that? What was that process like for you?
Let go. Just let go. It's on to the next. Like, take everything that didn't go right, and make sure that, take everything that went wrong, and on your next project, make sure you don't make those mistakes. I can't continue to live in the past. It was a mistake we made, but I felt like I was the person that was leading it, and I wanted it bad because the way we projected the revenue that was going to come from it, it was like this is a slam dunk. But unfortunately, I got blocked at the rim, and it was a thing that, if you don't let go of things, then you're not going to be able to move forward. So it was probably something that I needed to go through, because it gave me the tools and resources to make sure that the next project that is that financially expensive, or whatever that, something that is that expensive, I'm not going to make that same mistake again.
So it made you a better leader at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And ironically, one of the daily huddles that we had today is that adversity and basically the wind is required to set sail. And that was adversity, that was challenge that then made it possible for us to fly a little higher, and which kind of transitions into my next direction. We do these daily huddles every day, and we talked about how important culture is for us, based on our previous experience and why culture wasn't great and challenges and being happy. So what can you tell me about why culture as a business owner is so valuable to instill, and what are some of the things that you feel that we've done well to instill culture throughout our business?
Well, from the Daily Huddle perspective, I think it's one of the most important things that we do. It does two things.
Can you explain the Daily Huddle, because I
So
haven't talked about
the
it?
Daily Huddle is, regardless of where you are in our company, whether you're an installer, intern, designer, CEO, a manager, we have a quote, a word, or a 3-minute motivational video that's chosen from anybody in the company. And that starts our day. So we have these huddles that start from our leadership, then from our sales teams, our design teams, our telemarketing teams, where they talk about what that means to them. And it doesn't have to be surrounded or about your professional life. It can be about your personal life, or something, or maybe something that you've experienced before in the past. So it does two things for me. It gives me an opportunity to listen to everyone's tone and understand their mindset, because not everyone wakes up on the right side of the bed, and it gives you an opportunity to lead and redirect somebody when they're not in the good mindset. And it also gives us an opportunity to learn from one another, learn about each other for the most part, because I've learned a lot about you and a lot about our team through these daily huddles.
So the concept of the daily huddle, just so you understand, for the listeners, structurally, basically we do a 15-minute phone call, where we share this concept or inspiration, as Marco just mentioned, with our leadership team, and then everybody breaks off into individual teams. And the beauty is, within about a 30-minute time span, every manager or leader has an opportunity to connect with each of their team members, get an idea of where they are at for the day, and also have an inspired thought. And that's definitely something that I also agree and believe it's been very powerful for how we set our days every day. What other things do you think that we've done well, and maybe how about the things that we haven't done well that we've learned from as well?
So I think one of the most important things, one of the favorite things that I do, which is much different than I've ever done in the past, is, I was doing inside sales, so everyone's obviously going to the office. With our business, a good portion of our company is outside sales, so I don't get to see them, or we don't get to see them. We speak to them throughout the day, but our monthly meetings gives an opportunity for everyone to be under the same roof, and communicate with one another. And I think everyone works as a team, but we actually don't get to see each other. So I always think that's really important. And then our quarterly meetings, we do some sort of family event where our employees and our salespeople can bring their significant others, and to learn a little bit about where they come from, and how they are with their families is super important. And it's almost about showing them some sort of gratitude that we're grateful to have these people that are on this journey with us.
So that was definitely a valuable learning lesson, and it taught a lot to both of us. I learned a lot as well, and definitely, again, you were not alone in that decision. One of the things you just made me think about in that is our daily huddle quote today, which was that you can only take off against the wind. And from that experience, we grew and soared to the next level. The daily huddle is something that we do across our entire company and is part of our culture. You mentioned that culture from the previous place that you were at was part of why you left, and obviously it's a very important piece of our environment and what we've created. What can you talk to the audience about our culture? What do we do tactically that you think has developed this culture? Anything regarding culture as it relates to our small business that you can share.
So on a monthly basis, it's probably one of my favorite things to do in the month is when we have our monthly meeting. Obviously, when you have an outside sales organization, majority of the people that you work with are outside in the field, closing deals. So when you see them once a month or periodically throughout the week, but it gives us an opportunity for everyone to be under the same roof. And some of it's play during those meetings, and some of it's about work. But the most important thing is we're all under the same roof and we're learning from one another, and we do things to help unite everybody. And then our quarterly events is when we're taking out, our family members of our employees and salespeople. We do some sort of event, and it's almost about us giving back to a certain extent, because I'm so grateful. We can say it's our company, but the reality is it's their company as much as it's ours, because the growth that we've had over the past 3 years, it wouldn't be without them.
That's absolutely right. And I'm on the same page with that. So we have a quarterly experience, then we have a monthly experience. Tell me more about the daily experience. And actually, even before we get to daily, we do something on a weekly basis called Effed Up, Fired Up.
Yeah.
So that's also part of our culture. And then there's a daily experience. So tell me more about the weekly and the daily interaction.
So from a weekly standpoint, we have an hour call, where everyone, all the leaders, will come together, and we'll just kind of have a brainstorming session, and that gives them a voice, where they can pitch us or share, certain things that they're trying to do that are really working out well. And then we kind of let it try to happen organically within our company, and take what they're doing and roll it out. When I was at my previous place, we would have suggestions, but it would kind of fall on deaf ears. So when you give people the opportunity to help grow the company, and you take their word and you roll it out, they feel like they have a much bigger purpose than the role that they have currently in that seat.
So a lot of communication, and it's an investment of time. And as a small business owner, time is money. Time is really, really valuable. Obviously, we've identified that investing in our people is what produces ultimately the biggest profit. And one of the additional tactics we do is this daily huddle. Can you tell me, so we explain quarterly we have an event, then monthly we have an event, then weekly we give space and opportunity to hear people out. We also spend time, and that could probably be a whole nother podcast, on helping them become better people, because we both believe that better people produce better in other areas of their life, not just business. But this daily interaction, I think, has become one of the most powerful daily tactics that we do, that I think would be powerful and beneficial for any entrepreneur to implement throughout their business. Tell me the frame and why the Daily Huddle is so powerful.
So the Daily Huddle, we haven't missed a day in about 3.5 years. So it's either a word of the day, it's a quote, or a 3-minute motivational video. And everybody in the company at a certain point throughout the morning is going to be with their team, and they're going to share a personal or professional experience that they can relate to that quote. So it does 3 things. A, it always gives me an opportunity to redirect my mindset if I don't wake up with in a good state of mind. 2, it gives me an opportunity to coach and lead anybody where their tonality might be off, and you can just hear it, it. And then 3 is, when people are sharing their experiences, you're learning a lot about them. So the more we know about one another, the easier it is, to face adversity, and it's also it also gives you an opportunity to know more about their family.
So the morning and getting your mind right, this idea of the Daily Huddle, actually, kind of the frame came from one of our team members, which is just a great example of how, we listen and then we apply. But the inspiration for the day, if I'm not mistaken, actually came from Steve Harvey's jump video. Marco and I, for the first, I want to say, like almost 30 days, listened to this video. If you haven't listened to it, it's a powerful video that just talks about jumping and the realness that comes with jumping. So this is kind of summing up our last question or share that I'd like from you. Is any what would you say to any entrepreneur or intrapreneur that's within an organization or starting their own organization that is considering, making this jump, but also most of our listeners, my conversation is about being the complete person, and kind of having it all, body, being, balance, and business. Very familiar to you. We talk about it in our company all the time. What would be the last thing that you'd want to leave them with and share, for somebody that's going on that venture to become that person?
So the big theme in his video is obviously just going out there and just doing it. And it's not going to be easy, He describes that once you make this jump, your parachute's not going to open. You're going to hit some rocks. You're going to get cut. You're going to get bloody. And that goes back to what we said before, is just believe in yourself. It's the most important thing. And do not allow the outside noise to dictate your actions. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to tell you stories of either their insecurities or their own fears because they didn't have enough confidence to go out there and jump themselves. So it's always good to listen to your family and friends, and those are usually the ones that are going to hold you back to a certain extent. But if there's something and you want to create change in your life, you're going to have to do something drastically. And if you believe in yourself, then do it. Because the last thing that you want is to look at yourself in the mirror 30 or 40 years down the road and say, I should have, I would have, I could have.
Beautiful. No regrets.
No regrets.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to connecting with all of you guys on future interviews. Also, if you found value in this, please make sure that you share with anybody you think that this message can connect with. Rate and review the show, and I look forward to talking to you on the next one.